Ya tienes la... Ah, no, yo sé, aquí ya no, yo era para mirar si sale el enlace de transmisión.
Convencido, yo sé, pero no sea así, yo sé eso.
Sí, ahí no cuenta.
Ahí están los dos bolsillos.
¿Cómo estás?
Oye, escúchame. Oye, no son ellos. Sí. Oigan,
¿Qué está hablando acá?
Siempre es el Club de Ciencia Ficción.
Ah, sí. ¿Qué tal? El club de ciencia ficción.
No, si no estoy bien
¿Cómo te entras? Entra. Ay, qué como
porque el lunes, pues no es, los lunes no tengo clase.
No, pero no importa. Entra el martes y ya para el miércoles tiene tarea,
¿Quién engancha? Mira, gracias. Ya lo puedes parar porque se te comen los datos ahí. Vamos a... ¿Quieres esta de base?
Esto no es como... No sube de acá.
No, esa es más bien.
Ah, no, pues
para modo bien.
modo bien.
Los míos pues... Y ¿quieres
así?
Es porque es mucho más fácil, de hecho yo la dejo quieta dentro de la maleta y ya me relajo.
¿Están guardados? ¿Tiene mucho que hacer mañana?
No, yo vengo mañana
Pues para madrugar más que más que más.
Sí, claro. Hombre.
Ahorita tienes que madrugar mañana. Tengo ganas de acabar. A ver, de que todos en mi casa se fueron y yo estoy...
Ahorita vamos. ¿O quiere helado? 4.
No, café mejor.
Usted no sabe que estoy hambre.
Eso, sí, ahorita decidimos. Ay, qué hermoso apellido. ¿Será que se lo pone?
No.
Este sí, eso es lo que tiene atrás. Sí.
Y el de ahí abajo es... es un miembro de la sociedad llamada Hendrik Oort.
Ah, ok, yo pensaba que era Hendrik Oort.
Es un científico famoso y hay una asociación que es miembro.
Ey, está partiendo la EPN.
De que yo no sea y que la charla. Pero estoy aquí desde las 4.
Desde las 5.
la charla ya.
Yo he visto la charla, sí.
A las 7.
Porque es larguísima, voy a hacer más.
Uno, dos. This is yours.
Do you want to
Bueno, muy buenas noches y bienvenidos a otra edición del Coloquio de Astronomía. El Coloquio de Astronomía es un evento que realizamos cada 8 días aquí en el Planetario. Nos reunimos principalmente ñoños de la astronomía y sus amigos. O sea, a los que vienen por primera vez posiblemente fueron invitados por otro ñoño. Y lo digo porque, claro, un viernes, inicio de Feria de las Flores, Festival de la Trova, y uno hablando de astronomía, tiene que ser uno muy ñoño para hacer una cosa así. Bueno, el día de hoy no tenemos el coloquio regular, que es, digamos, en un lenguaje muy informal, lo dicto yo, etc. Y es un coloquio informativo, sino que vamos a tener un coloquio especial, porque tenemos un invitado especial, como seguramente se habrán dado algunos cuenta por redes sociales. Before we start, I will give some information. Antes de comenzar, voy a darles un par de informaciones interesantes e importantes. Me está Andrés por aquí, que era que me ayude con otras. La primera es que este próximo lunes tenemos en horas de la tarde, buen diablo, me olvidó el dato, creo que es a las 4 de la tarde, a las 2, es a las 2 de la tarde, un evento muy especial aquí en la ciudad de Medellín, y es la primera cátedra del pregrado de Ingeniería Aeroespacial, que la va a dictar el profesor César Ocampo, actual director de Conciencias, y que es un ingeniero aeroespacial pues bastante reconocido en el mundo. Seguramente ustedes han oído hablar de él. Esa cátedra es abierta, es libre. Va a ser en el auditorio del edificio de extensión, el edificio negro que queda aquí al frente del parque. De modo que todos son bienvenidos, todos somos bienvenidos en esa cátedra, que repito, es un evento realmente histórico para Medellín y para Colombia, el inicio de un pregrado pues muy especial. Bueno, también tenemos de este sábado en 8 el inicio del diploma de astronomía de la Universidad de Antioquia, que es otro evento pues muy importante especialmente para la comunidad astronómica en la ciudad. Es una serie de cursos que venimos dando desde hace ya más de 10 años en la ciudad. Todos son bienvenidos todavía. Tenemos el diploma inicia con una actividad gratuita también, de este sábado en 8 a las 9 de la mañana. Es una conferencia, esa conferencia la dicto yo voy a ser el profesor del curso en Medellín del diploma, y esa conferencia se llama Del polvo interestelar a la vida. El curso de este semestre en el diploma de astronomía es un curso sobre planetas, pero el énfasis va a ser en astrobiología, la vida en el universo. Todos están invitados al diploma. Las inscripciones van hasta este viernes que sigue en 8. Muy bien. Ahora, ¿cuándo es? Leo está por aquí. ¿Cuándo comienza el curso de eclipse? No. Bueno, recuerden que nos estamos preparando desde ya para el eclipse del 21 de agosto. Hoy no vamos a tener, como les digo, el coloquio regular, no vamos a dar mucha información sobre el eclipse, pero por favor no se pierdan el próximo coloquio, que ya es el 4 de agosto, donde vamos a empezar ya a dar instrucciones muy concretas sobre la observación del eclipse y dónde lo vamos a ver. Muy bien. Gafitas ya se están vendiendo aquí en la tienda a mí me preguntaban por las gafas para el eclipse, ya las están vendiendo aquí en la tienda del Planetario, pero aquí en el coloquio, a partir de la próxima semana, vamos a empezar a entregarle gafas solamente a los más ñoños entre los ñoños. Es decir, tienen que responder por la ñoñada. Muy bien, comenzamos entonces la charla de hoy, como les digo, con un invitado muy especial. La Universidad de Antioquia viene realizando desde hace 5 años un evento anual que se llama Astronomía, y en ese evento invitamos a profesores, 2 profesores del Observatorio de Leiden en Holanda, en la ciudad de Leiden en Holanda, la Universidad de Leiden en Holanda. Este año tuvimos el placer de tener entonces a 2 profesores. Hace 8 días tuvimos aquí la presencia de algún Kanawadi que nos estuvo hablando sobre la historia de la gravedad. Seguramente muchos de ustedes asistieron a la charla. Y esta semana entonces tenemos la presencia de Vincent Van Eylen, que es el profesor, digamos, el segundo profesor de los cursos. Vincent, les cuento ahí muy rápidamente, aunque él, ahorita seguramente van a tener la oportunidad de hablar con él los más interesados. Vincent es físico de la Universidad de Leiden, en Bélgica. Es decir, realmente Vincent es belga, a pesar del apellido. El apellido le suena a uno como alemán o holandés. Vincent es belga, entonces, y hizo su doctorado en Dinamarca, en Denmark. In which institute did you?
In Aarhus University.
Aarhus?
I will not ask you to pronounce.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, sí. En un impronunciable instituto en Dinamarca, correcto. Allá hizo su doctorado. Su doctorado lo hizo en exoplanetas. Estamos hablando entonces de un experto en exoplanetas. Vincent nos contaba que él ha participado en el descubrimiento de 9 planetas extrasolares. O sea que no es como cuando viene por aquí cualquier, digamos, amigo de nosotros aquí en Medellín, ¿cierto? Pónganle atención, y vamos a tener un invitado muy especial porque es una persona pues muy diferente, no lo tenemos, digamos, muy corriente por aquí. Vincent actualmente es postdoc en el Observatorio de Leiden, en la Universidad de Leiden, y trabaja también con exoplanetas. Pero bueno, no le voy a quitar más tiempo. El tema de hoy, como ustedes lo ven, es obviamente exoplanetas y su conexión pues con la búsqueda de vida extraterrestre. Voy a explicarles muy rápidamente cuál es la metodología de esta conferencia. Nosotros cuando hicimos la primera conferencia de la Astronomía aquí en el Planetario, first talk was with Bernard, nos dio mucho susto porque ¿cómo hacer una conferencia en inglés? O sea, entonces le dijimos al Planetario, por favor tráiganos equipos de traducción simultánea, que ya la gente se va a salir toda apenas la conferencia comience. Y resulta que finalmente nos decidimos y dijimos, no, dictemos la conferencia en inglés, ¿qué es? Vamos a ver cómo responde la gente. Y nos ha ido bien. No sé cómo nos va a ir hoy, pues no quiero adelantarme, que no nos vaya a salir la mitad del auditorio. La conferencia es en inglés. Pero, the talk is in English, you are not less pushed to speak in Spanish, pero cada más o menos 4 diapositivas, yo voy a meter la cucharada, 1 minuto, y voy a tratar de hacer un resumen corto de las diapositivas que se acaban de ver. Solamente como para que usted, que seguramente hay mucha gente, sobre todo los más jóvenes ya son bilingües, no somos los viejitos los que no tenemos oído para esto, pero los jóvenes ya son más o menos bilingües, ustedes van a entender mucho de lo que dice seguramente Vincent, pero si algo queda de pronto ahí en las nubes, pues yo puedo entrar ahí y ayudarles a entenderlo. ¿Ok? Listo, las preguntas las pueden hacer en español. Questions at the end will be in Spanish or in English. Do you prefer that the questions are in the middle of the talk or at the end?
Anytime.
Anytime. O sea, ustedes pueden preguntar, interrumpir y preguntar lo que sea. Bueno, no digo lo que sea, pero yo voy a decir que whatever they want to ask, they can ask. Okay, Vincent, thank you very much for being here with us, and please enjoy this space.
Thank you. Hola a todos, buenas noches.
Hola, buenas noches.
Everything else will be in English. Sorry about that. I could do Dutch or English.
No, English.
So I'll do English. Spanish will be a little hard, but I will, try to speak slowly, and Jorge will help me. Thank you for the introduction. I hope you only said nice things about me. Mostly. Okay, great. All right. So I said you can interrupt me anytime with a question. Let me start with a question to you, which is, how many planets are there? You can just shout if you know the answer. How many planets?
How many? ¿Cuántos planetas?
Anyone? Thousands.
Millions.
Millions.
Billions.
Trillions. 4,000. That's a pretty good one. Anyone else? I heard few thousands or a few million. It's a pretty wide range of different answers, even for astronomers. That's it? A few thousand? Anyone less than a few thousand?
Made of the billions. Oh, from thousands to trillions.
To trillions, all right. So, when I was born, I think we had about 9 planets. We considered Pluto a planet, but unfortunately, Pluto is no longer a planet, and so here in our solar system, we have 8 planets. So when I was born, this was the situation. We had the Sun, and then we had Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And Pluto, if you like Pluto and you want to call it a planet, be my guest. I think Pluto should be a planet too. But then later on, we got to know more and more planets. And so some years ago, when I started doing my research, when I started my PhD, about 5 years ago, things looked a bit different, and they looked like this. And this is a cartoon that I always like to show, even though it's now 5 years old, and it says all 786 known planets, so 786 to scale. And then it says, this here, this is our solar system. These are the 8 planets, Earth, Mars, Mercury, Venus, and so on. And everything else orbits another star. Most of them are huge, because these are the ones we learned to detect first, but we're finding that the small planets are actually the most common ones. We know nothing about what's on any of them, but with better telescopes, that would change.
What are the size of Jupiter in this plot?
So this is the solar system. So Jupiter, this is Jupiter.
Okay.
So most of those planets are pretty big, but we're finding that the smaller ones are actually the most common ones. And it ends with saying, this is an exciting time. And so if you stop listening from now on, please remember this at least. This is a very exciting time where we're finding new planets the whole time. Now, this is the situation as it was 5 years ago. And meanwhile, I've made a quick update to this plot, and things look something like this, where you now have thousands of planets that we know about. Now, Jupiter is here in white, and there's 8 planets in white in our solar system, and everything else is orbiting another star. And in fact, just today, it turned out that the total number of planets that we know about is now exactly 3,500. So, who said a few thousand? That was pretty good. The planets that we know about right now is about 3,500. Trillions maybe means all the planets that we think are somewhere, but certainly we don't know that many. We know 3,500 as of today.
Ok, solo para resaltar dos cositas interesantes ahí. La primera es que los que todavía, digamos, son inside de Plutón, como un planeta del sistema solar, él también es inside de Plutón. Entonces, si quieren, para formar un club ahí de pro-plutonianos. Y la segunda son los números, aunque repito, yo sé que la mayoría han entendido. Entonces, el número más importante de todos los que nos han mencionado son los 3.500 planetas que conocemos a la fecha. Hoy se completaron 3.500 exactamente planetas a la fecha.
You speak a lot faster than I do. So, how do we find those planets? Well, my talk will be 3 different parts. First of all, I will try to explain how we find those 3,500 planets. And then I will go to the question we're all asking ourselves, which is there life on any of these planets? And finally, how are we actually going to find it? Maybe it doesn't want to be found. Can we still somehow find the life on these planets? So let me start with the first. How do we find those planets in the first place? So, this is a picture I took a few weeks ago. Anyone can recognize the city? It's in Portugal. And it's a really bad picture. Like, it's not, you can say it to my face, this is a really bad picture. And the reason it's a really bad picture, as everyone who's ever taken pictures knows, is because it's pointing straight towards the sun. And really all you're really seeing is the sun, and everything else here is pretty dark. And when we try to look for exoplanets, when we try to look for planets on any other star, we have exactly the same problem. Because we're trying to find small, dark planets like Earth, but they're right next to the sun, to their stars, which are really, really bright. So what we're trying to do is to find some kind of planet somewhere up there, but all we're going to see is the sun. So generally, it's really hard to find planets because they're very close to their stars, they're very dark, and the stars are very, very bright. In fact, they're about 10 to the 10th power brighter. So that means, I don't even know how to pronounce it in English, a 1 with 10 zeros, so
10 billion.
10 billion, 10 billion times brighter. So if we get 10 billion light particles, 10 billion photons from the star, we might get 1 from the planet. And so it's really hard to find planets directly. Now, we have done it in a few cases, in a few exceptional cases, where we've actually used advanced instruments to find planets right next to their stars, nevertheless. And so that looks like this. And now, this part here would be the sun, or it's another star. It's really dark because we've really tried very hard to remove all the light from that star. And here, you see a planet. This little bright dot here is a planet around another star. Now, the reason we know it's a planet is because if we look at the same star, but 6 years later, we see now the white dot is right here. So it's moved around halfway around the star in 6 years' time. So if we make images over time, we see that this is a planet, just like Earth, which is moving around the star, just like we're moving around the sun. Now, it's a very young star, which makes the planet very, very young. When I say very young, I mean it's only about 1 million years old, which is perhaps pretty old, but in astronomers' terms, it's not very old. 1 million years is not very long. The Earth, of course, is several billion years old.
Bueno, repito, muchas de las cosas están autoexplicadas, pero hay dos datos ahí bien interesantes. Ustedes vieron la fotografía en la que se veía la ciudad y el sol, obviamente que refleja un poco el estado de cosas cuando buscamos planetas alrededor de otras estrellas, y es que el brillo de la estrella es muy grande. Entonces un número que seguramente escucharon la referencia es, el brillo de una estrella es, comparado con el brillo de su planeta, 10.000 millones de veces más grande. Entonces ya se imaginarán lo difícil que es detectar la luz que viene del planeta, 10.000 millones de veces. Para que se hagan una idea de lo que es eso, piensen en lo que es un peso y 10.000 millones de pesos. Ya con eso uno más o menos se hace una idea de lo que son 10.000 millones de veces. Ese es un primer detalle. Y un segundo dato, ustedes pues seguramente vieron la explicación que nos dio sobre esta imagen de un planeta alrededor de esta estrella, y es la edad de esta estrella. Esta es una estrella que tiene apenas 1 millón de años. 1 millón de años. 1 millón de años es más o menos, digamos, 3 veces lo que lleva nuestra especie en la Tierra. Es mucho, mucho más joven que la edad del Sol.
Okay, so as I said, in most cases, it's really difficult to find any planets in this way because the stars are just too bright and the planets are too close. So in the large majority of situations, we cannot actually see the planets in this way. So what do we do instead? We try to find it in some indirect way. And so when we see planets in the news, they look something like this. They have this nice kind of images, and there's a star, and here there's a planet, and that's the kind of things you see in the news. But when we talk to an astronomer, what we think of when we see a planet could look like this or like this. It's not as impressive. There's no nice colors. I'm sorry. But this, to an astronomer, is what a planet looks like. Either this way or something like this. And I'll explain both of these. This is how we see planets as astronomers. And then once we're really done, we're going to make an image like this to show it to a journalist. So the first way is called the radial velocity way. And so I'm going to show a little movie. What happens when a planet moves around a star? If a planet moves around a star, it's not just the planet that is moving, it's also a star that is moving. You can see there's a star right there. It's also moving a little bit while the planet's moving much more. And while that's happening, the light of the star is moving towards more blue light or more red light. And this is, I'll show it again, this is what we call the Doppler effect. It's the same effect when you see an ambulance or you hear an ambulance. You hear the sound very differently when it comes towards you and when it's moving away from you. You have blue shifts and red shifts of sound and of starlights. And so as the planet is moving around, the star is also moving around, and we can see it moving because when it's moving away from us, the star will look a little bit more red, and when the star is moving towards us, it's looking a little bit more blue. Okay, so what do? We look at a star. This is a star. This whole background is a star. It has a lot of different colors. We can look at it in different filters, in different light, in different colors. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to measure if it's moving away from us or moving towards us. And we can do that because it has all these lines in its atmosphere where it's absorbing light. And at some point, these lines will look a little bit more red, and at some point they will look a little bit more blue when the star is moving away from us or going towards us. In the same way that if we listen to the sound of an ambulance, we can hear if it's coming towards us or when it's now crossed us and it's moving away from us.
Bueno, ustedes vieron ahí la explicación gráfica pues, de cómo se hace la detección indirecta de los planetas, viendo cómo cambia la luz de la estrella cuando se mueve. Lo importante en esta diapositiva es que obviamente nosotros cuando buscamos planetas no vemos cambiar el color de la luz de la estrella, que no cambia realmente mucho. Lo que vemos es cambiar la posición de estas rayas negritas que ustedes ven aquí. Este es un arco iris, this is the spectrum of the sun, which has been, que fue cortado. Era tan largo que lo tuvieron que cortar y empezar a poner uno encima de otro. Y esas líneas negras son las que buscan los astrónomos y que son las que cambian cuando la estrella se mueve hacia nosotros y cuando se aleja. La línea negra se mueve un poco hacia el azul, un poco hacia el rojo, y ese movimiento es el que finalmente buscan detectar.
And so this is the kind of thing when I said this is how an astronomer sees a planet. This was the very first planet discovered around another star. And so what you have here is you have time, and then you have a movement of the star. When we have measurements here, when we have data here, the star is now moving away from us, the star looks red. And when we have data points here, the star is moving towards us, the star is now blue. And so over time, what we're seeing is, at some point, the star is moving away from us, and then later, the star is now moving towards us. And so what's happening is that this star is moving away from us and towards us the whole time. It's doing this kind of movement back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. Now we don't see any planets, we just see the star moving, but because the star is moving like this, we now know there has to be a planet around it that's making this star move back and forth. So we don't see the planet at all, but we're seeing the movement of the star, and from that we know there has to be a planet. And the way we do this in practice is we go to telescopes, which are in nice places on Earth. For example, in Chile here, this is a telescope up the mountain in Chile, where you can have the best weather. It's hopefully not raining, because then you can't see any stars and you can't make any measurements. There's hopefully not too much light. I see you have a nice dome on the roof here, which is great, but in the middle of the city, it's really hard to see a lot of stars. So we put most of our telescopes in nice places in the world where there's not too much light and where hopefully it's nice weather to look at a lot of these stars. And so we can see if they're moving towards us or away from us over time, which will tell us if these stars have planets. We don't see the planets, but we see the stars, and we can see the movement of the stars. It's another picture. This is in Europe. It's the Canary Islands. It's La Palma. It's right next to Tenerife. I always like this because this is where I go myself to observe in the Canary Islands. And you can see here, this is up a mountain, because you can see these are the clouds. So this telescope is so high up a mountain that you're above the clouds, and of course that's nice because then you can see the stars, even if there's clouds, because you're higher than the clouds. And so this is the daytime, of course, but in the nighttime you can see a lot of stars from these islands in the Spanish islands. And this is a picture I took myself. Again, you can see all the clouds. You can see the telescope getting ready for the night. when we will start looking at a lot of the stars. And finally, I just want to point out this: if you look at any of these islands, if you ever have a chance to go up a mountain where there's a lot of telescopes, you do so. It's a really nice sight, and you can see here there's actually telescopes: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe a few more small ones. Because all of the telescopes in the world are almost all in a few places. Because these are the best places where it's the nicest weather, where you're high up a mountain, where there is not too much light, where there's not too much airplanes flying over, and so on. So we put almost every telescope, a European telescope, an American telescope, from different places, we put them all on the same mountain. So even when I was working in Denmark, I was going there to actually measure the stars. Because I don't know if anyone has ever been in Denmark, but it's really not a great place to see the stars, because it's raining all the time.
Okay, let me... Bueno, como ven, nos han mostrado una imagen, digamos, de algunos sitios, digamos, de telescopios en montañas en Chile y en Islas Canarias. Un detalle interesante, could you show us the harps in Canary Island, Roque, los muchachos? Ahí. This. Él ha utilizado este es un telescopio muy importante porque es HARPS, que es el instrumento con el que se busca planetas así con el movimiento, y él ha utilizado este telescopio, esto está en Islas Canarias. Y lo otro interesante que decía, que seguramente lo escucharon, es que todos estos telescopios que you show us en Tenerife, no, es que estos telescopios que ustedes ven en la cima de esta montaña son de países diferentes. Todos los países europeos, digamos, en el continente europeo, van a esta montaña y ponen allá sus telescopios, porque claro, obviamente en Dinamarca, no mencionaba, pues llueve todo el tiempo, no se puede ver el cielo, entonces lo que hacen ellos es comprar un telescopio y ponerlo en la cima de esta montaña.
This is a picture that was taken by one of my friends when I was there. As you can see, you can start understanding why this is a great place. There's almost no light, and so even with the normal camera, you can really see all the stars that we have.
And the arrow is what?
All the stars.
This arrow?
No, that's my... Yeah, that's a really big star. Okay, so just to show you this again, what we're doing is we're looking at a star, we're looking at the light of the star, but at some point the star is maybe moving away from us, and at some point it's moving towards us. And when it's moving away from us, the star will now look a little bit, this is when it's moving towards. When it's moving towards us, the star is now looking a little bit blue, because it's coming towards us, and so the light looks a bit more blue. We see this light is blue, so we know the star is moving towards us. A little bit later, the star is moving away from us, and so the star looks red, and so we know that. And so from this, we're now telling ourselves there must be a planet. And we don't see the planet, this is all we see. What we know is that what's really happening is something like this. At this point, there's a planet here that's moving away from us, and when the planet's moving away from us, the star is moving towards us. And later, the planet's now on the other side, it's now moving towards us, and so the star is moving away from us. So we don't see this planet moving, but we see the star moving, which tells us the planet must be there. Okay, so this is how we found all of the first planets. The first few hundred planets were found in this way. But more recently, we've started using a different way of finding planets, which is called the planet transit method. So, how does that look like? I'll show you another video. We're now waiting for the planet to just cross over the star. There's a planet here, and it's passing the star, and as it's doing so, it's just causing a small stellar eclipse. It's a little bit like the solar eclipse, as I hear you're going to have here in a few weeks. So when there is a planet between me and the star, it's going to block a little bit of the brightness of the star, and so we're going to see the variation in brightness of the star. So what we have here is we're not seeing this. We're not actually seeing the planet. We're not actually seeing the star like this. But we're seeing that the brightness of the star is a little bit less, for a while, and at some point it will return to its normal brightness. And so if we look at stars and we look at how bright they are, and for a while we see the brightness is now a little bit lower, maybe what's happening is there is a planet that's in between us and the star, and it's causing the star to look a little bit less bright. After a while the planet disappears, and the star will now again look bright as before.
Un comentario importante es, y no lo ha mencionado tanto en el método anterior, que es el método de la velocidad radial, como en este, es que el planeta nunca se ve como nos lo muestran estas, digamos, representaciones como didácticas. Nunca vamos a ver el puntico atravesando la estrella, nunca vamos a ver el planeta dándole vueltas a la estrella, sino que lo que, bueno, no lo vemos, sino que lo que vemos es lo que hay abajo, que es la disminución en el brillo de la estrella. Es lo único que se ve. En alguna diapositiva ustedes escucharon, él nos dijo, así es como se ve un planeta, eran un montón de punticos que subían y bajaban. Esa es lo que tenemos, digamos, lo que realmente obtenemos de los planetas.
And so the specific way to do this is by using a big telescope that's going to look at the brightness of stars for a long time. So we want to see how bright is this star, and we want to see that we want to make a photo of a star every minute or every hour or something like that. We do it all the time, until at some point we see, oh, the brightness is a little bit less, which will tell us there is a planet. So the way to do this is to have a big telescope that will look at a lot of stars and measure how bright they are. Now this is pretty hard to do from these telescopes that I showed you earlier on the mountain, because unfortunately our own Earth has an atmosphere, and that makes it really hard to measure the brightness of other stars very well. So instead of doing that, we will usually go to space. We will use a telescope that we put in space. We put it on a rocket, and we send it to space. It will be a space telescope, a satellite, from which we can measure the brightness of different stars. And one such telescope is called Kepler. It looks like this, and this is a telescope, but it's put in space, it's put on a rocket. And so this is how it looked like when it was being built in the lab by these people who came from the moon, and they were building the Kepler. Yeah, going to the moon. They were building the Kepler satellite, the Kepler space telescope, getting it ready to be launched, and then eventually it was launched. You can see this here. This is the actual launch. Kepler sent to space, and then we could make measurements. We could measure the brightness of stars from space for a long time. So this was done in 2009, and I was in a conference just a few weeks ago where we actually celebrated 8 years of Kepler data, because just a few weeks ago it happened to be a birthday for Kepler, 8 years of Kepler. And so we were very lucky, because since Kepler had a birthday, we got cake. This is a cake which has Kepler on it. Now there were a lot of people there, so we were lucky there was 2 cakes. And so this was another cake of Kepler. This is actually all the stars that Kepler was looking at. And so we got to eat Kepler cake to celebrate that it was now working for 8 years. So between 2009 and today, it's been observing a lot of stars to look for planets. And I just want to say one more thing about this. When you think of this, you think this is very recent, and so 2009, this just started a few years ago, and this is all very successful. But at the same meeting, there was this long, very long, outside, filling this whole room, there was this whole timeline of Kepler, of everything it had done. And it didn't start in 2009, it actually started way before that, because of course, you don't just think, I want to send a rocket to space with a telescope, and I'm going to do it tomorrow. It started way before that, and so there was this timeline, which I thought was really nice. It shows a lot of these things here, which went very far back in the past. And a few things it said here was Kepler rejection 1. So this was when people first said, we want to send a telescope to space to look for planets. But at that time, this was 85 or something like that, where there wasn't even any planet known. And so people said, no, we're not going to do that. It's never going to work. So people tried again, and this was Kepler rejection 2. And again, people said, it's never going to work. Don't bother. It will cost a lot of money. Don't even try. So this was rejection 2. And then it was here, Kepler rejection 3. another few years later, saying again, this is not going to work. Why do you keep trying? This is never going to work. And then finally here, this was projection number 4. Still, people were not convinced this was ever going to work. But eventually, people got convinced, and then later, this is when people finally decided we should do this, and it cost a lot of money. It cost about $1 billion. But eventually, this is what found the most planets of these 3,500 we know today. About 2,000 have been found with Kepler. So, and maybe a lesson is, if someone says no to you, you're going to try at least 5 times to be sure if what they mean is really no, because perhaps in persistence, at least in science, I don't want to give you the wrong message here, in science can really pay off, and sometimes it takes more than one try to get to the right answer.
Ok, muy importante resaltar aquí que para poder descubrir planetas utilizando este método de los eclipses, se tiene que hacer observaciones en el espacio, ¿cierto? Eso es una clave de lo que me estaba diciendo, y para ello pues se lanzó este telescopio espacial Kepler, que como lo decía ya al final, ha sido el más exitoso, digamos, de los observatorios que se han utilizado para buscar planetas. De los 3.500 planetas descubiertos, aproximadamente 2.000 los descubrió Kepler. Se escucharon la historia sobre la torta. Él estuvo hace poquito en una conferencia, en inglés conference significa en realidad un congreso, no es una conferencia como esta, sino un congreso. Él estuvo en un congreso y partieron, digamos, como la torta de cumpleaños de Kepler. Kepler empezó a funcionar en el año 2009, ya están celebrando los 8 años del inicio del funcionamiento de Kepler. What was the birthday? The date?
The date, it was a few weeks ago.
July?
Maybe like
Was it
3
July?
weeks ago or something. Yes,
It was
the
in-
first date I was in July.
Okay, maybe you can remember and we can also.
Okay.
Yes, yes, of
You have to
course.
wait
The next year, for
next
example,
year,
yes, of course. Okay, lo último que decía, que es muy importante, seguramente también lo entendió la mayoría, es que Kepler no empezó en el 2009, sino que empezó mucho antes. Miren, ya vieron el diagrama donde nos hablaba sobre, fue rechazado un proyecto rechazado 4 veces, porque fue presentado en el año, en tiempos en los que no se conocía ningún planeta. En el 95 fue que se descubrió el primer planeta. Entonces, cuando se presentaba un proyecto, un telescopio, para buscar planetas, decían, estás pidiendo mucha plata para buscar cosas que no sabemos si existen. Y nos dejaba un mensaje al final de que si Kepler, digamos, tuvo 4 rechazos antes de ser aceptado, pues que todos deberíamos también intentar muchas veces hasta ser aceptados. Okay.
Okay, so how do we actually use this? How do we actually find a planet? It's a very broad, general question, but I want to show you quickly how this can be done, and I thought the best way to show you is to show you a planet that I found. And I'll show you a planet that I found, and I'll show you how it was done, and then you can, go home and find your own planet. So, what we get from this Kepler data, what we get from this space telescope, is data that looks something like this. We have time, we're looking at the star over time, and then we have something like the brightness of the star.
I'm sorry. Nos va a mostrar cómo se encuentra un planeta y nos va a mostrar cómo se encuentra uno de los que él ha descubierto. Quiero aclarar eso para que le vean la emoción a lo que nos va a mostrar.
So,
He understood. Yeah. Just speak Spanish. You speak in French, so you understood most.
I understood what you're saying. Be careful. So this is brightness of a star over time. So now you can say, well, this is a star. Would this star have a planet? And so maybe does anyone think this star has a planet? You can raise your hand if you think this star has a planet. Anyone? All right. Well, those who raised their hands are right, but there's really no good way of telling just if you look at this data, because you see a lot of things, but it doesn't really look very clear like there's a planet somewhere. But we do a lot of work, we do a lot of statistics, we do a lot of mathematics to make this data into something that looks a lot nicer, because this shows a lot of things that have something to do with our camera, with our measurements, with our instruments, but they're not real. But after we do a lot of statistics, the data now looks like this. And now perhaps you can see there is these things here that seem to come back all the time. And so what we have now is over time, at some point the star seems to be a little less bright. And it keeps happening every few days. And so if we now put this together, and I'm going to just zoom in, I'm going to say, I'm going to put all of these drops together in one zoom, then things look like this. And so what you have is the brightness of the star, and then you have this drop for a few hours, and then the brightness of the star comes back, and then you keep going, and it will be back here, and it will drop again, and so on. And you can keep going, and it will drop again. And it happens the whole time. So this now perhaps looks like you really have a planet.
Sí, muy importante señalar ya que de la primera a la segunda hay un proceso estadístico. Es la estadística lo que lo hace a uno pasar del primer gráfico, que es lo que sale del telescopio, al segundo, y el tercero es un zoom de uno solo de esas rayitas que bajan, que es un tránsito.
Okay, so now maybe those who raised their hands were lucky because they turned out to be right. This seems to look like there is really a planet, because this really looks like what I showed you before in the movie. So let me show this in a quick cartoon version. You have a planet, and it's going to cross in front of the star. It's going to make the brightness of the star drop, and then at some point the planet's gone, and so the brightness of the star is back. That looks exactly like what we're seeing. So at this point, this seems to be what's happening. There is a planet around the star. We're not actually seeing any of this, so we're seeing this, and so we now know maybe there is a planet. Now, we're not actually done. We can be a little bit worried. Maybe there is something else that looks like this, but it's not really any actual planet. Maybe it's something else. It looks like that. We hope it's a planet. Maybe it's not. And so we can be worried that it's some kind of imposter, some kind of false alarm, something that looks like a planet, but in fact, it's just something completely different. And so, for example, we're hoping something like this, but maybe what's really happening is we have some kind of binary star. We have two stars. They orbit each other, and that maybe also can cause this kind of transits. So we have to be quite careful before we're going to say that what looks like a planet is really a planet. Because, for example, double stars, which move around each other, they can also eclipse. They can also cause these kind of drops. And so in general, before we, call our favorite journalists, we have to be sure that what we're finding is really real.
There is a local comment about this word, false positives. In Colombia, false positives is a very negative thing. So people always laugh when we talk about false positives because it's related to the war and something. Pero ustedes entendieron entonces que, claro, el tránsito puede ser producido por otra cosa que no sea una estrella. Por ejemplo, puede ser una compañera que tiene otra compañera y cuando dan vueltas el brillo baja y entonces uno cree que está tapando un planeta, pero en realidad es la compañera tapando la otra.
Okay, so what are we going to do in this case? In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to make new measurements of the same star, and we're going to try to see if it's also moving, because if there is really a planet, the star should also be moving. It should be red, it should be blue, it should be red, it should be blue. And so we can try to see if that's also happening. And so that's what we did, and in this case, so this was our transit, and then we actually see also that this star is turning blue and is turning red, and it's doing that with the same 5 days whenever there is also moving in front. So now we have two different ways of seeing these planets. We don't really see the planet, but we see its influence on the star in two different ways, and at this point we can really be pretty sure that it's really a planet.
Muy importante señalar que el gráfico de la derecha es hecho con el método entonces de la velocidad radial, o sea, el gráfico de la derecha es viendo el movimiento, el de la izquierda es el tránsito. Entonces con los dos se confirma que es un planeta. Which instrument did you use for the second measurements?
So this is three different instruments, of which the first two are in the pictures that I showed you,
HARPS
and the Nordic telescope, which is a Danish telescope in the Canary Islands.
Correcto. O sea, las observaciones de la velocidad real las hizo allá en la isla donde nos mostró, en el observatorio donde nos mostró. Okay.
Okay, so now we have a planet, and so we can tell ourselves, are we done? And we are mostly done, but of course, there's one more important thing to do, that is to say, well, this looks like a planet to an astronomer, but it doesn't look like a planet to anyone else. So we're going to make a little image of what this planet is really like, and it turns out this is how it looks like. This is the planet, this is the star, and its star is much larger than the sun, And the planet is also really close to the star, whereas the sun and, for example, Mercury would be over there. So this is just to show you, this planet's really close to a really big star, and so even though as an astronomer, this is not how we see planets, of course, we have to make a picture like this. And it's really important to make pictures like this, because that's when people can know that you've actually found a planet. The very first time I actually found, this was not my first planet, but the first time I found a planet, this was several years ago, we made this picture. This was another planet I found, and then what happened, as we put this in the media, someone on Twitter tweeted about it, and this guy called Elia de Rupo, you probably don't know him, but he was the Prime Minister of Belgium at the time, and so he wrote this thing. He said, congratulations to the Belgian Vincent Van Eylen, who has discovered a new planet with his theme, most important part, hashtag Belgian talent. So of course, we have to make these images, because if we had just put this curve, he would have never known about it.
Bueno, muy bien. Entonces, bueno, ahí se lee el trino. Lo importante aquí es el mensaje de que los astrónomos tienen que hacer imágenes bonitas para que el trabajo se note, ¿correcto? Por eso es que vemos tantas imágenes de planetas así espectaculares, etcétera. Y no es que veamos el planeta así, sino que lo que queremos es que políticos como este personaje, este fue el primer ministro de Bélgica, noten el trabajo de investigación. Le voy a preguntar una cosa, no sé si alguien tiene la misma pregunta, pero ¿por qué ese planeta no se llama el planeta de Vincent? ¿Cierto? Si él lo descubrió, ¿por qué no llama el planeta de Vincent? ¿Por qué tiene ese nombre tan aburrido? ¿Cierto? If you use pretty images, why you don't use pretty names? For example, the Vincent's planet, or something like that, instead of Kepler.
You know what? You know what? That's a great. I think that's a great idea. I think you should say that Vincent's planet.
Okay.
Number one.
From now.
Yeah, you should start doing that. Now, usually we name the planets after the instrument that we use. So in this case, we use Kepler, so we call this Kepler 410. We're not very original. This was number 410 that someone discovered with Kepler, and we don't name them ourselves. But don't let that stop you, and please do call these Vincent's planets.
El nombre de los planetas se hace con el instrumento, pero vamos a seguir a partir de ahora en Medellín llamándolo el planeta de Vincent. Correcto. Okay.
Okay. So let me summarize what I just said so far. I said, well, first of all, we would like to make these really nice images where we really see the planets, but it's really hard because they're so close to the star. So instead, what we often do is we see how they influence their star. We don't see the planets, but we see their influence. Either by making the star move, blue and red because of the planets, or when they move between us and the star, and they block some light of the star. So these two ways are how we find almost every planet that we know today. Almost all of the 3,500 planets are found in one of these two ways, or sometimes in both of these ways at the same time. Okay, now that we know how to find a planet, I think it's time to move on to the real question of tonight, which is, do any of these planets have life? Is there life somewhere else that's not just here on Earth? So, when I talk about life, I have to talk about this guy, which name is Frank Drake. And you may have heard about him. He made an equation that's called the Drake equation. And so, it's about the only equation I'm ever going to show today, but the equation looks like this. All right? So he's trying to find out a number n, and this number n is supposed to tell us how many civilizations are there that can communicate with us. So if this is 0, this means we're all alone, which is a little bit sad, or perhaps it's good. If it's another number, it means there's other civilizations out there, there's life somewhere else. Now, this is really nice because it's really easy. Now we just have to find this number n. So what we have to do is find out r, f, n, f, f, another f, and l. And then we're done. So what are these numbers? Well, the first one is something about how many stars there are, something about how many stars form, how many stars are there. Now this is fine. This is easy. We know this is a very big number. There's a lot of stars. So this is not a big problem. There is a lot of stars. So if this was the only number, we would be fine. There would be a lot of life. But then the second number is how many of those stars have planets. That's still not enough. We then need to know how many of these planets could actually have life. How many would actually develop life, not just they could have it, but would they actually have it? We're still going on. They have to be intelligent life, because if it's not intelligent life, it probably can't talk to us. Although, well, you can argue about that one. And then finally, is it really wanting to talk to us? Which is probably a really hard question, because I don't know if aliens would really want to talk to us. So this is really the numbers, and there's a final one, which is how long does this civilization actually live? Because if it only lives for 10 years, maybe we'll never see it, because we're just going to miss it. Okay, so we need to know all of these numbers to find out, is there life on any other planet?
We call Frank Day here Papa Seti. Do you know what is Papa? How is Papa in Dutch? Papa.
Papa.
Yeah, Papa. And in French?
Papa.
Okay. Okay, this is
And
Papa.
Spanish is really hard, yeah.
Papa Seti, el papá de Seti. Ok, creo que todo está, digamos, explicado en la diapositiva, no hay mucho que decir, excepto que él dijo que esta va a ser la primera de muchas ecuaciones que va a mostrar a partir de ahora. No, que esta es la única ecuación que va a mostrar. Importante señalar solamente dos factores ahí. El primero, que es cuántas estrellas están naciendo en este momento en la galaxia. Es un número muy fácil de determinar, bueno, fácil en el sentido para los astrónomos, es muy fácil de determinar, porque se conocen muchas estrellas. Y el último, ¿cierto?, que es el tiempo que dura una civilización, digamos, que es un número extremadamente incierto. Primero, porque solo conocemos una civilización y no sabemos cuánto va a durar. I'm talking about this L, which is very... Pero también importante, porque veo que la mayoría de las palabras son muy entendibles, pero estoy willing to communicate, puede ser interesante analizarlo y pensarlo, es cuál es la fracción de las civilizaciones extraterrestres que quisieran comunicarse con nosotros. O sea, en esta ecuación es importante entender, correcto, que son capaces y que quieren comunicarse con nosotros. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so there's a lot of numbers here, and we don't know very much. It's pretty hard to know if aliens would want to talk to us. I don't know, maybe. But the first few numbers, we do know. How many stars there are, there's a lot of them that have been known for a long time. But I want to show you that since only a few years now, we also know quite something about how many planets there are, and perhaps even if those planets could potentially have life. So I'm going to try to answer at least, a little bit of these questions here, which is not just how many stars there are, but also do they actually have planets, and could those planets have life? So, I just want to show you, these are all the planets that we've seen. And so, this is a nice little movie. This is not even all the planets that we've seen, because it's from a while ago. But this is a nice little movie that shows all planets, or a lot of the planets, they're moving around the star, and you can see here different systems, big planets, lots of planets over here, really small ones, some that have many, 4, 5, and so on. So this is just an overview of all the many planetary systems that we've seen, and it's just showing you, we're just one of all of these, we just have one solar system, but there's so many others. So perhaps this suggests there must be some other system that could potentially have life. And this can run forever, and I can keep looking at this, some of these things move fast and slow, and this just keeps going. But to really answer our question, we need to know more than just we found a few of these planets. We need to know how many are there really. And to do that, we're going to again use our Kepler telescope. We're going to use our Kepler telescope, which has found quite a few planets, not just the one I showed you. And these are all the red dots here, which are planets that have been found with Kepler. But there's more. There's not just red dots here, which are planets that have been found. There's also blue colors, which show how good are we at finding planets. if we're in the white region, we find all the planets, and if we're in the blue, we're not finding any planets. And this shows you the period. So the Earth is at 365 days, and then it shows you the size. The Earth is at 1, and everything else here is larger. And so what this is telling us is that perhaps we know a lot of planets. There's a lot of red dots here, but they're all up here, bigger than Earth, and we don't really see any here with 365 days like Earth. So that's maybe bad news, because there's nothing that seems to be just like us. However, this region is in the blue, which is telling us that this part of the diagram is really hard to find, because these are small planets, and they're far away from their stars, so they're hard to find. So even if we haven't really found any planets here, it doesn't mean they're not there, they're just hard to see.
Ok, este es algo muy importante porque una de las maneras de responder a la pregunta de si hay vida en el universo, como vieron en la ecuación de Drake, es saber cuántos planetas hay realmente y qué fracción de esos planetas son como la Tierra. Este gráfico que hay aquí, que es pues, un gráfico duro de entender, es un gráfico que habla sobre la ignorancia. O sea, a ver, la idea es que nosotros ya conocemos 3.500 planetas, pero para saber cuántos hay realmente, pues habría que verlos todos. O para saber cuántos de los que hay en la galaxia son tierras, habría que verlos todos. I will do an analogy. Por ejemplo, si ustedes quieren preguntarse, ¿cuántos medellinenses son albinos? ¿Correcto? ¿Cuál es la fracción? ¿Qué porcentaje de las personas que vivimos en Medellín somos albanos? Yes? Yes. Como yo que soy casi albino, ¿cierto? ¿Cuántos albinos? Entonces usted sale a la calle y se encuentra un albino. Y dice, descubrí el albino. Entonces 1 de cada 3 millones de medellinenses son albinos. Porque yo vi un albino. No he visto más. ¿Cierto? Eso es este gráfico. La pregunta es, si usted ve un planeta allá afuera, ¿usted cómo juzga cuántos de planetas como esos hay? Entonces en este gráfico, la parte blanca le dice a usted que los puntos rojos representan los planetas que ha visto Kepler, y en la zona blanca, los planetas que ha visto Kepler, digamos, son una buena representación de lo que existe. Entonces usted cuenta ya cuántos planetas pesados hay, y cuenta cuántos descubrió en total, y lo que le da bien. Pero en la parte azul, ustedes ven que no hay casi puntos rojos, es porque no existan planetas allá, sino porque no hemos tenido posibilidad de ver planetas en esa zona. La parte azul aquí representa nuestra ignorancia. Al final, Vincent explicaba que miren que en la parte azul, que es, en este está la masa está la masa del planeta, y aquí está el periodo orbital, allá está la Tierra. Could you point us the Earth? Yes, it's over there. Entonces miren que allá no se ven puntos, entonces diría, no hay tierras, en la galaxia no hay tierras. Casualmente la Tierra está en la zona donde más ignorantes somos. Entonces no podemos todavía decir a ciencia cierta cuántas tierras hay realmente por nuestra ignorancia, no porque no la hayamos visto. Sorry for sending this.
That's okay. I feel like now you're speaking more than me. So this is a little bit bad because we don't even really know if there's any other planets like Earth, because they're really there where it's the hardest to find them. But we have nevertheless learned a lot about how many planets there really are. We've tried to put numbers to all of these, and if I give an overview of these numbers in a different way here, what this is showing you is how big are the planets and how many stars have such a planet. And so if you take a planet around, 1 Earth to 2 Earths, so a little bit bigger than Earth maybe, you see that about 12% of the stars, or 14% of the stars, or 18% of the stars, depending how big exactly, have such a planet. So that's a lot, because that means, 1 in 5, 1 in 10 of the stars have a planet that's more or less the size of the Earth. That's a lot, because that means there's so many stars. That means that you don't have to look at many stars. Almost all of them probably have some kind of planet that looks a little bit like Earth. And if you look at the periods, again, same kind of thing. A lot of stars have planets. 10–15% have planets at different periods. So even if we don't know how many really have something that's exactly like Earth, we are starting to see every star seems to have at least one planet. Every star. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe someone's going to find a star that has no planets, but so far it seems harder to find stars that have no planets than stars that have planets.
So if you sum up, if you add up these percentages between 1 and 2, 1 and 2.8, is more than 30%. Okay, maybe it's even larger. It's 26.
It's 44, I think.
44, sorry. Es muy importante. Álvaro vive en inglés. Bueno, el inglés de, casi el inglés. Yo tengo casi el inglés de Maduro. Well, Maduro, do you know Maduro? Yeah, the president of Venezuela has a very funny English. So, 44%, this is another number to bring to their homes. 44% de las estrellas que tienen planetas de tamaños como la Tierra o un poco mayores. 44% es la mitad. Y ahí está, pues, digamos, el punto más importante.
Okay, and the final number that I want to give you here is, if we now try to get some kind of idea of how many really have something that's exactly like the Earth, about the same size and about 365 days, well, that's about here. And so you can see the red line here means we don't actually know. But if we have to guess from everything we do know, the number is about 5%. 5% of the stars that look very much like the Sun have a planet with about 365 days and about the size of the Earth. So again, this is 5%. This is really a lot, because it means there is billions and billions and billions of stars. So this means there is also billions and billions and billions of planets. So whoever said there is billions or trillions or whatever planets really was also right, not just the left wing here who said 3,000. So we really are starting to find planets are everywhere, and a lot of them probably look like Earth as well.
And so reason I have done a simple calculation aquí, very simple. Esto significa, este número que nos acaban de dar, que pueden existir en la galaxia 100 millones de planetas como la Tierra, casi igualitos. Mismo tamaño, misma distancia, misma estrella. 100 millones de planetas. Otra vez, hagan una idea de lo que es una moneda de peso y 100 millones de monedas de peso. 100 million stars with Earths.
A lot. That's what I said. So, now, one more thing which people always ask about is, well, why do we actually need this planet to be like Earth? Maybe a planet can be completely different and still have life. And probably you're right. Maybe we don't need a planet to even be like Earth. Maybe something else could still have life as well. And so when we think of what needs life, we usually tell this story of Goldilocks, which is a story, I don't know if there's a Spanish translation for Goldilocks.
Los tres ositos, ¿cómo llaman?
Ricitos de oro.
Ricitos de oro, claro. Pero yo nunca los conocí como ricitos de oro.
Maybe we need a new translator, because... and so it's a story of a girl who has to, or a bear who has to eat, and something can be either too hot, and then you can't eat it, or it can be too cold, and then you cannot eat it either. And so it turns out things have to be exactly the right temperature, and it's the same for planets. Planets have to have the right temperature for them to have life, because we are fairly sure that to have life, you need liquid water, you need oceans, and then you can make life. And so if the planet is too hot, there will be no water, and if the planet is too cold, everything will be ice, and you also cannot have any liquid water. So we need to find these kind of planets that have more or less the right temperature, not too hot, not too cold, to find life. And so this is the blue region here is where a planet has to be for it to be not too hot and not too cold. And so this is the Sun, and then this is the Earth, which luckily is just about on the blue region, which means the Earth can have life. So that's good, because sometimes when people work on where this blue region should be, they find that the Earth is not in the blue region, which would be really a problem. But generally, the Earth is in this blue region, and then this is where how far a planet can be for it to be in the right temperature. And what this also shows you is that if you go to small stars, stars that are much smaller than the sun, you can be much closer to the star and still have the right temperature to have life. And so perhaps, instead of looking at stars like the sun, we should be looking at stars that are smaller, and then their planets can be closer, and they can still have life as well. And one example I have to just show you is TRAPPIST-1, which maybe you've heard about. It was a recent discovery of new planets around the star, and this is the star. It's a tiny, tiny little star. If you compare it to the sun, the star is so small that the planets can be really close and perhaps still have the right kind of temperature. And so, if some people here, Belgian people here, have found 7 planets around this star, and they look roughly like this. 7 planets. And they're all more or less the size of the Earth. They have nice colors, which we have absolutely no idea if that's true, but we just make up a few colors to make it look more like this, but we don't know the real colors. But we know they're all more or less the same size as the Earth. And they're very close. You know, they have periods of 1.5 days, 4 days, you know, and the Earth is 365 days. So they're really, really close to their star. But that's fine, because the star is so cool. It's such a cold star that even if you're really close to the star, it's still not very hot.
Bueno, como ven, estamos viendo los planetas de TRAPPIST-1, de los que hemos hablado aquí en el coloquio. Miren el tamaño comparado con la Tierra. El detalle más importante es que todos estos planetas están muy cerca a la estrella alrededor de la que giran, y algunos de ellos pueden tener agua líquida en la superficie. Pero le voy a preguntar por la cerveza. Do you understand? Yeah, right. TRAPPIST is actually a community, a religious community, right? It's a religious community that produces a good beer.
Yes.
Have you tasted this beer? Okay, one of many TRAPPIST beers.
You're asking me if I have tasted the beer?
You're Belgian, so yes.
Maybe.
There are a lot of this TRAPPIST beer in Belgium. It's very popular. It's popular.
Yes.
And it's good.
Yes.
I mean, you have compared it with German and I don't know, Dutch beer and.
Wait, you're asking me if it's Jesus.
What is the best coffee in the world?
I was gonna ask you, like, have you tasted coffee? Are you really sure?
What is the best beer in the world? The best. I mean, not the region, but the best beer you have tasted in your life. Maybe the brand or the best. Te estoy preguntando por la mejor cerveza, porque él es belga y los belgas tienen la fama de producir las mejores cervezas del planeta, incluyendo las cervezas TRAPPIST. Por eso está burlando de mí, porque le estoy preguntando porque si ha probado cervezas buenas. Entonces, which is the best beer in the world? I'm sorry for asking this.
We need to have another talk after this talk.
No, just one beer, just to remember this brand. And
Let's try Carmelit.
Carmelit.
Yes.
Is that Carmelitas? Carmelit. Okay, I have taken note. Okay, go ahead.
You also want to say something about this, or
No, this is not important. I have already done. Okay.
Okay. So, where are we at? Ah, yes. This was TRAPPIST. So actually, TRAPPIST-1, the star, is so small that it's actually just about the size of Jupiter. So this is how small this star really is. It's really almost the same size as Jupiter. And so these are the planets. Now they're white. That's, we don't really know their colors. And so there is the moons here of Jupiter. So perhaps this looks a little bit like Jupiter and its moons is TRAPPIST-1 and its planets, because the scales and the sizes are a bit like that. So small is this star, and so perhaps these are the kind of stars that will also have life, because that would be really nice, because there is really a lot of these small stars. Okay, now that brings me back to Papa Sete, Frank Drake here, with his equation, because we haven't fully solved the equation. We have solved a part of it. We said, okay, how many stars are there? There's a lot of stars, and we've now kind of answered at least a little bit of this. We've said there's also a lot of planets, and probably even a lot of planets that could have life as well. They're kind of in the right temperature, and they might have life. And then there's a few other questions here, like how easy is it to make life? Could it be intelligent? Does it want to talk to us? We don't really know the answer to that question. But at least, the fact that now, for the first time, just in the last 10 years, we've learned there is really a lot of planets, should tell us that, I think, there must be a lot of civilizations out there. Now, if there is a lot of civilizations out there, you're going to start worrying and say, well, why have we not seen them? There's one option. They don't want to talk to us. Maybe. There's another option, which is one that I like. There's a cartoon here that shows the Drake equation in a slightly different version. This is again the same equation here. So it starts here, same way, number of communicating civilizations in our galaxy. There's all these numbers here, the number of life-supporting planets per solar system. There's the probability that life on a planet becomes intelligent. It's all fine. There's an additional number here, which is the amount of bullshit you're willing to buy from Frank Drake. So, what I want to say with this cartoon, I don't want to insult Papa Seti here, what I say with this cartoon is, we really don't know all that much about those numbers, and even if we did, it doesn't quite prove that there is no life there. And in fact, when I was in a meeting as well a few years ago, Papa Seti was there and he talked about this himself. And so he was saying that perhaps we just really haven't figured out how to find the life. We found the planets, but we really haven't quite figured out how to communicate with it. And he said, I'm quoting Frank Drake himself here, he said, perhaps there isn't an internet in the universe, an intergalactic internet, but we're just not yet connected to the internet, so we don't know how to find that life, we don't know how to talk to it. That doesn't mean it's not there.
Ok, entonces, como nos explicaba en la diapositiva anterior, entonces ya tenemos casi todos los términos de astrofísica importantes, que son las estrellas, los planetas, cuántos planetas como la Tierra hay, y tengo una parte que es biológica, que es cuántos planetas pueden tener vida, cuáles planetas de esos pueden ser vida inteligente, que podríamos asumir que es común, ¿cierto? Entonces, eso significa que la mayoría de los términos son conocidos, solamente nos queda por conocer los términos de si se quieren comunicar con nosotros y también de cuánto dura, pero nos ha agregado, pues ustedes ahí en la diapositiva, un término adicional que lo puso un famoso caricaturista pues, científico, y es para demostrar que la ecuación de Seti pues, es una ecuación de todas maneras que pues, podría modificarse de muchas maneras, incluyendo, ¿cierto?, agregar un término para saber qué cantidad de maricadas podemos estar más dispuestos a comprarle a Frank Drake. I have also, nos estaba contando una historia de que él estuvo en una conferencia también, en una reunión, en una meeting, y escuchó una charla de Frank Drake, y Frank Drake sugería en esa charla que tal vez las civilizaciones están allá afuera y establecieron una internet, podría haber una internet galáctica o una internet universal, y lo único que pasa es que nosotros no nos hemos conectado a la internet. Es como si viviéramos en la mitad del Amazonas, obviamente no tenemos dispositivos para conectarnos, y tal vez por eso no nos hemos podido, digamos, comunicar con ellos.
How did you translate? How did you translate?
Maricada, la cantidad de huevonadas o de mierda que uno le puede comprar.
En su conocimiento relacionado con los exoplanetas, ¿qué has escuchado o tu opinión personal sobre la estrella Tau? La estrella Tau.
Yes, Talisa is asking about what you have heard, or what is your opinion, your personal opinion about Talisa.
Heavy star, so also known as the alien megastructure star. I don't think that shows something like aliens. I think so. Tabby star, for everyone else, is a star where we're seeing a lot of strange variations in its brightness, which looks like these transits of planets, but it's more than that. It's a lot of transits and a lot of different objects, and so perhaps people have suggested this could be some sign of another civilization. I don't think, personally, that is what's happening. I think there will very likely be a better explanation for it, and I think we should not believe we've seen aliens until we're really, really sure it's not something else. So I think it's very unlikely to me that is a star that shows signs of life directly.
Okay. La estrella de Tauri es una estrella misteriosa que algunos han interpretado como que tuviera alrededor una estructura extraterrestre. Y la opinión que tiene, que tiene Vincent es que él no cree que sea una estructura extraterrestre y que primero vamos a terminar descartando pues, todas las posibilidades pues, más obvias, menos improbables. Bueno, we had a series of questions. ¿Para qué hora preguntar?
Bueno, nos llegamos, fuimos a oír el de ahora. Would you like chicharrón?
Do you like chicharrón? Yes, we tasted.
Bueno, no. En los llegamos fuimos ahorita, la mayoría por los platos del monstruo eran de la amarilla hacia abajo, o sea, rojas, marrones, las estrellas más azules, más blancas, tipo A, tipo B, también se ha encontrado, o sea, no aparece como estadística de esa parte, pues por la zona de habitabilidad que solo está desde la amarilla hacia abajo. ¿Qué pasa con las más luminosas, las más potentes?
The question is about the most luminous stars, blue stars. What about them? Why they are not in the habitable sun diagram?
So, the very, very big, very bright stars, that is a good point, and we don't really know if they have planets. We don't really know that much about most of them. But they could have planets, and if they do, they could have planets that could have water and that could have life. The reason that I like the small stars more than the big stars is because there is a lot more small stars. The large majority of all stars there are small, and there's only very few very big stars. So it's more important to know if small stars could have planets because there is so many of them.
Correcto, es un asunto de cantidad. Hay muchas estrellas pequeñas, por eso son tan interesantes, pero no sabemos realmente qué pasa también en las estrellas azules y más masivas. More questions, no? This.
Ahora voy a preguntar si desde afuera vieran el sistema solar y pues tenemos 8 planetas, verían también el tema de que el Sol se está moviendo para atrás y para adelante y digamos ese movimiento lo causaría todo solo Júpiter porque pues digamos el que más hace bullying al personal, ¿cierto? Y he visto también que como que las gráficas y todo como se las
Uno.
Entonces, siempre ha mostrado un planeta de un Sol y pues cómo hacen para ver varios. Bueno, Trappist, por ejemplo, tiene varios. Entonces, ¿cómo funciona eso?
The first part of the question is if extraterrestrial intelligences out there can see
The wobble of the sun, you know, can detect the presence of our sun because of the planet Jupiter. And the other part of the question was, what about multiplanetary systems? How they detect multiple planets?
Okay, so first part of the question, can aliens see us or can aliens see the solar system? Probably yes. If we can see another planet with our telescopes measuring the blue light and the red light, for example, then aliens can probably do the same if they have telescopes like us. So just as for us, it's easier to find Jupiter, big planets, and it's harder to find small planets. So if they're like us today, they will fight about everything except for Earth, but they can probably do it. And the second part of the question was, help me out, multi-planet systems. So we can find them in the same way. If the star moves, the wobbles, we can have different wobbles at the same time, and we can find more than one planet. And the same with the transits. If the planet moves in front, we can find multiple planets moving in front. In fact, Trappist that I showed you, Trappist 1 has 7 planets. They're all moving in front of the star, in each one by one. So we can find many planets around one star.
Correcto, o sea, la respuesta es sencilla, simplemente se ve el movimiento de varios planetas. O sea, so it is not a periodic movement, but something more complex. Y si hay varios planetas, también hacen varios tránsitos.
Pásela, pásela. El ruido, búsquela el ruido.
Buenas noches. Mira, pues en el caso de sistemas como TRAPPIST e incluso tu planeta, después de descubrir un planeta, ¿qué sigue? Pues ¿cuál es el siguiente paso? Porque de TRAPPIST no hemos vuelto a escuchar mucho, ¿cierto? Y pues no sé, la composición, el tamaño, no sé. ¿Cuál es el siguiente paso después de descubrir un planeta?
So what do we do with planets now that we found them? What is next?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so
No more questions.
Right. So I'll continue in Spanish.
Understanding Spanish in Medellín is better than discovering a planet.
I'm not sure about that, but thank you. So I will answer your question, but I need to give you a slide. Like I want to talk about one more thing today, which is the answer to your question. So shall I do that first, and then we can take maybe a few more questions. Okay. So I'll answer your question, but it will take a few minutes, and then I'm done, and then we can ask every other question to be asked. All right. So the question is really good because now we found those planets. We know there's many of them. But what's next? I mean, we know they are there, but how do we actually find the life if it's there? So I said, there was a great equation. I said, well, how can we find life if it doesn't want to communicate with us, or at least, how are we really going to find it in general? And so I lied a little bit earlier when I said I'm going to only show one equation. I'm going to show one more, but now this is really the last one, I promise. So I want to show you another equation, which is not as much known, but it's quite similar. It's after Sarah Seeger, someone that I worked with for a while, who's in Boston at MIT, and she says, well, we're trying to find the same number n, but it's not asking how much life is there, it's how much life can we find. It doesn't matter if you want to talk to us or not, or something like that, it's just how much life, how much civilizations can we, from here, find out about. And it has a number, a lot of fractions here as well. The first one is how many stars can we look at. So we can look at many stars and we're more likely to find life. We need stars that are quiet, that are not too noisy, not too difficult. We need them to have these kind of Earth planets in this Goldilocks area, not too hot, not too cold. And then we need to be able to observe them. They need to have life, and then it needs, and this is the key part, it needs to have some kind of signature gas that will show us from here, without having to go there, without having to talk to them, that it has life. So how does that work? Well, in some cases we can learn about the atmosphere of a planet just from here. So I'm going to show you one case. This is the case of a planet. So this is moving around the star. And it's not just causing a transit, here it's causing a transit, blocking the light of the star, but it's also going to move behind the star. It's also, at some point, disappearing behind the star. And we can also measure that disappearance behind the star. And when it's not just disappearing, it's reflecting some light from the star back towards us. So we're seeing this variation here, depending on where the planet is reflecting the light of the star. Now why do I show this? Is because this tells us something, not just about finding the planet, but about what it's like. It tells us how much light does it reflect, which may tell us, does it have clouds? Does the planet have clouds, or does it have clear skies, and so on. And so people have used this in practice with this kind of data here. These are data points, different curves, they look something like this, but I'm going to just skip to this and show you the press image, the nice one, and that looks like this. And people have said, well, this is the planet, and we now know this is our own Jupiter. You might recognize this one, we knew this one already. But this one is now what we've learned. We learned it might have some clouds like this because of this pattern that we can see in how it reflects light from the star. So in some cases, we can learn not just that there is a planet, but also what is its atmosphere like. There's another big way to do that, and that is to look at how the light of the star will move through the atmosphere of the planet. So this is the star. It's shining, and we're here on this side somewhere, and we're looking at the star. So now the planet's in front of the star, and so we will see this drop in light that I showed you earlier. But now maybe some of the light from the star will go through the planet's atmosphere. We will still see it, but it will look a little bit different because it's crossed through the atmosphere of the planet. And so some light that we see may actually pass through the planet's atmosphere before it gets to us. And that's interesting, because if we can measure that light, that will tell us something about what this atmosphere is like. Does it lead all light through? Does it absorb every kind of light? What is in the atmosphere? We can learn that from seeing which light passes through the atmosphere. And so, in this way, we can again measure the spectrum of the star, measure these lights, measure these lines of the star, but do it during the transit, when the planet's in front of it, and then we'll learn not just about the star, but also about the planet. And so what happens, cartoon version is, this light from the star, some of it passes through the atmosphere, we're measuring the star, but now we're seeing that there's not just a star, but there's a bit more, and that's because of the planet. And so we can use this to learn about the atmosphere of the planet.
Just a very short comment. Entonces, lo que me está explicando aquí es cómo además de ver el planeta podemos aprender sobre la atmósfera del planeta. Porque si vieron en la ecuación de Seeger, ¿cierto? Que es la ecuación de Sarah Seeger, que es una excelente astrofísica además, en la ecuación de Seeger, que es cuántos planetas podemos detectar, hay una parte muy importante y es de cuántos de esos planetas podemos detectar signos de gases que nos puedan señalar la presencia de vida. Entonces ahí nos mostró cómo con la luz reflejada en la atmósfera del planeta, el primer caso, se puede conocer un poco sin ver el planeta, en ninguno de los casos del planeta. Y aquí nos está mostrando cómo cuando la luz de la estrella pasa a través de la atmósfera del planeta, en el espectro aparecen líneas de absorción que nos revelan la composición de la atmósfera del planeta, without seeing the planet in any moment.
Okay, so we're trying to learn about the atmosphere of the planet here by looking at the light from the star that goes through the planet. And so, again, what we're then seeing is, in some, we're seeing how big is the planet, we're seeing how much light does it block, but in some wavelengths, it's going to maybe block more light because there's water in the atmosphere, and it's going to absorb all light at a certain wavelength because of this water. So we can use this technique to learn, for example, is there water in the atmosphere of a planet? Now, I won't lie, it is not easy, but we can start doing it in some cases, and we've used this to try to learn not just about finding the planets, but about what is their atmosphere like. Does it maybe have an atmosphere of water? Does it maybe have an atmosphere of other elements that we can then learn about? I'm going to show you just, before I finish, I'm going to show you two examples. This is one thing that we tried, so we're measuring the depth, we're measuring how much light goes through, and so you can see here in different wavelengths, these are all data points, and then we have all these models here, the different colored lines, which tell us how would things look like. For example, the blue, if the atmosphere was full of water. If the atmosphere was full of water, things would look like this, and that doesn't really is what our data looks like. So this tells us that perhaps there's no water, or even worse, that this planet is full of clouds and just nothing is going through, and so we can't learn about it at all. But another example, here we've again done the same thing. We've measured how much light goes through the atmosphere of the planet, and we've done it in different wavelengths, and we see now this kind of pattern, and this is now starting to match some of these different models that would tell us what the atmosphere is like. And so in this case, it does seem like there is water in the atmosphere of that planet.
Muy importante estos gráficos, como los está explicando. Estos son observaciones ya reales. Estos son espectros reales de la atmósfera de planetas que hemos visto. Y como ven, las distintas curvas, si usted la veía en el diagrama, representan cuánto de una sustancia hay. Por ejemplo, en el anterior vimos que no había agua en la atmósfera de ese planeta. Nada, cero agua, la mayoría era CO2. Pero aquí, este es un planeta, mírenlo bien, pues, que empiezan así la córnea, este es un planeta en donde aparece claramente la presencia de agua. O sea, este es un planeta que tiene agua en la atmósfera.
Okay, now why am I talking about atmospheres? It's because I think that atmospheres will be the way in which we will eventually find if there is aliens on other planets. And the reason is that some elements that we might find in an atmosphere can only be caused, or are very likely to be caused, by life. If we look at our own Earth, we know that humans, that we change our atmosphere. we make the Earth warmer, we cause global warming, but generally, we just make the Earth atmosphere different. For one, the Earth atmosphere has things like oxygen in there, which are there because we have plants and trees that change the atmosphere of the Earth. So, what we're hoping to do is for other planets to find elements which cannot be there if there was no life on this planet. And once we find those elements, which we call biosignatures, things that look like they must be caused by life, they will tell us that maybe some of these planets would actually have life. So we're looking for example, oxygen or ozone or other elements that are very likely caused by life. If we can one day detect those in the atmosphere of other planets, that will give us some information that this planet actually has life. So I just want to finish by saying, there is a lot of things to think about in the future as well. This is just where we're at right now. We've found 3,500 planets, and we're starting to learn about their atmosphere. We've even found water in one of them, and we can hope in the future to do even more. There's a lot of different instruments planned in the next 5 years or 10 years or even less. There's, for example, TESS, which is a different telescope, a different thing like Kepler, which is going to be put in space next year, which will find even more planets, much more nearby, around much brighter stars, which will make it a lot easier to do all these kind of things. There's other things like James Webb Space Telescope, which will also be launched very soon, which will help us to understand the atmosphere of these planets. And much longer in the future, in 10 years, there will be Plato, which will even, again, in space, which will find even way more planets, probably tens of thousands of new planets. And so, to summarize, I just want to give you the, and then finally there's ELT here as well, which we're building the European Large Telescope, which will again help us to understand atmospheres.
Vincent. Muy importante, entonces al final nos dice, la clave es detectar gases en la atmósfera de los planetas que puedan ser asociados con la vida. Entonces nos decía que esa va a ser la manera de saber si hay vida allá afuera, detectando gases, o sea, oliendo a los extraterrestres. Y estos son los futuros telescopios que van a buscar esos gases en estos planetas.
And so, my final message, I'll give you a timeline here. My final message of today is, we've only been really finding those planets very, very recently. We've been on Earth for a long time. Humans, some millions of years. It's taken a lot of time to get somewhere. We started writing, that's a few thousand years ago. And, America was discovered, I speak as a European here, hundreds of years ago. And so if you go only now, French Revolution 200 years ago, but if you go now, it's only in this last, the last 25 years that we've started finding planets. When I was born, we only knew 8 planets, or 9, in the solar system, and there was nothing else. And now in just 25 years, in just a really, really tiny little fraction here, we've actually started finding all these other planets. We're starting to find how many there are, we're starting to learn about what's on those planets, and we're starting to study their atmospheres, which I think within the next 10 years or 100 years, something like that will tell us if some of them may have life. So that's my message here. We've only known them for 20, 25 years, but there are many. They're very different from each other, but many of them also seem to look like the Earth. Since a few years only, we're starting to learn about them. We're starting to learn about their atmospheres. We're starting to learn how we can study those planets beyond just finding them. That's only really 5 years, maybe 10, that we can do this kind of thing. And so you can wonder what will the next 5 years, or 10 years, or 50 years bring. But at least I hope I've convinced you what I started out to do, which is to see that this is indeed a very exciting time for exoplanets. Thank you.
Ok, al final les dice que de toda la historia de la humanidad solo llevamos 25 años en estos tiempos excitantes. Ya se imaginarán lo que viene en el futuro. Before giving before making more questions, I have a question. How old are you?
How old are you?
No, I'm not who has discovered nice plants. Okay, how old are you?
27.
Okay, so si ustedes a los 27 años no han descubierto 9 planetas, están en nada, pues, o sea, en los 27 años 9 planetas, no jodas. Bueno, vayan a okay, let's start with the question from our friends. Okay, the question was, what happened after you discovered a planet?
Yeah, so I hope I answered that mostly. So we find the planets now. We're hopefully finding planets on close stars, bright stars, and the next step is to learn about their atmospheres, which will tell us not just that they're there, but hopefully what the planets are like, if they have clouds, if they have, eventually, if they have dinosaurs, aliens, or whatever you want.
What can you tell me about the bacteria that can travel around the universe that we have already discovered? I read already that we have discovered that some bacteria can travel and could travel in the past years for explosion or something like that. And what can that tell us about our perception of ET?
So, question is about bacteria and if they can travel around in space. So, I'm not an expert on bacteria in much of a way, but it does seem to be that bacteria can survive to space. This is actually a really big problem when you want to, for example, go to the moon or go to Mars. We put we make a Mars rover that goes to Mars, but we don't want to put our bacteria on Mars. But it's really hard to make things completely clean, and it seems like these bacteria can survive. So it does seem like bacteria might survive through space and might travel around in space. But what that really means for life, I don't know. Some people also suggest they may have come from somewhere else to Earth. But whether or not that's true, I don't think we know that today.
Estamos hablando de bacterias, hermano, que escucharon las bacterias podrían colonizar el universo, pero están aquí explicando, nos está explicando Vincent, que bueno, que las bacterias podrían sobrevivir el viaje, pero todavía pues no sabemos, digamos, exactamente si eso puede pasar. También estamos muy preocupados por la contaminación que con estas bacterias podemos producir en planetas potencialmente habitables como Marte.
Hi, Vincent. When you talk about study the biospheres of the other planets, we are based on carbon, right? Or we're thinking more about life based on another type?
I think, so the question is, if we look for life, do we look for carbon-based life? I think the answer is today, when we're looking for life on other planets, when we see, we think maybe it produces oxygen and things like that, we're really modeling it after ourselves. So we're really thinking life somehow must look like us, which may not be true. Maybe, maybe aliens are very different from us. But we have to start somewhere. And I think the best way to start is to find planets that are a bit like the Earth, and maybe to look for life that is a bit like life that we know. That doesn't mean there is not possibly other life, but it's really hard already to find life, to find if planets could have life. So I think for now, mostly we're looking for things that look somewhat like us as a kind of first step. But whether or not there is life that's completely different, yes. So people, there is a lot of people who work on trying to understand, what would extraterrestrial life be like? What could it be like? How could it form? Does it really need water? But the answer is, until we find it, we're probably not going to know.
Ok, la hora preguntando es por los extraterrestres que pueden ser, o por la vida que podría estar basada no en el carbono, sino por ejemplo en el silicio. Entonces la respuesta de Vincent es, sí, muy bien, podría existir vida diferente a la vida que existe en la Tierra, pero por alguna cosa tenemos que comenzar. Entonces vamos a comenzar con la vida que vemos aquí, pues parecida a lo que vemos aquí en la Tierra, sin descartar que existan otras posibilidades.
Hi, what about the exomoons? I mean, how we can detect exomoons?
Exomoons, so moons around other planets. I think the best, we haven't really found any yet, although, I should say, there was some very recent news yesterday, suggesting maybe we found something that could be a moon around another planet. The best way to find them is probably, again, using the transit method. So when a planet moves in front of the star, it's blocking the light of the star, and we can see the planet, or we don't see the planet, but we know the planet's there. If we have a moon, that's going to show up as well. It's going to also be between us and the star, and so that will show up in the same way as a planet shows up, although a lot smaller. So we can use the same methods that we use to find planets, in principle, to find moons around those planets as well, by looking very carefully at these transits of the planets. But it's very hard, and so far no one has really been successful. But like I said yesterday, someone has claimed they may have seen something that could be a moon, and they're going to re-look at the star with the Hubble telescope to see if the moon may actually be there. So hopefully in a few months, or maybe next year, we will know if we actually found the first moon around another planet.
Bueno, Giovanni está preguntando por las exolunas, exomoons. ¿Cómo las detectamos? Entonces él nos está explicando que se detectan de la misma manera que los planetas, simplemente que el tránsito es más chiquitico porque la luna es más pequeña. Y nos contaba que ayer surgió un trabajo que dice haber detectado la primera exoluna, pero que solamente hasta octubre se va a confirmar cuando el telescopio espacial observe otra vez esa estrella y confirme si es una exoluna.
Hey there, thank you for giving us this presentation. It's very good. I was really thrilled about knowing, first of all, that you're only 27 years old and you've already discovered 9 planets, man. So, yeah, I wanted to add something to a question that you were asked about very massive stars and why they were not shown in the graphic. Maybe one thing to add to the reason for that is that massive stars usually live to younger ages compared to smaller stars. And maybe that doesn't give enough time for life to develop to as complex as we see on Earth. Or maybe the life does develop, but then these stars usually end up with a big supernova, and that would decimate all life in the system. Right?
Yeah, yes. So I agree with everything you said. So big stars, they may have planets, but big stars do not live very long. Now, astronomers' term is not very long, it's still some millions of years. Is that enough to get to intelligent life? I mean, on Earth, it took a long time, a few billion years to get, to dinosaurs and eventually to humans. But I think the truth is today, we don't know. Because we don't really know if it has to take very long to get to life. We know on Earth it took a long time, and then once it happens, once there was the first life quickly became everywhere, and there was dinosaurs everywhere, so to say, now humans everywhere, and bacteria everywhere. And so once it starts, it seems to go fairly quickly. So it's possible that on another planet, another star, maybe it doesn't take that long before life starts, and then maybe a few million years is enough. It's not so sure that we're going to be around in a few million years anyway, so let's see. So I wouldn't rule out the big stars, even if they don't live very long, but you're right, maybe we need a long time to get to life.
Un comentario muy interesante sobre el hecho de que las estrellas más grandes, como nos preguntaba Giovanni, que no aparecen ahí es porque también, comentaba el compañero, es porque viven más poco, y como viven más poco tal vez tienen menos tiempo para desarrollarse la vida compleja como la vemos aquí en la Tierra. Pero el comentario de Vincent es, sí, pero tal vez no, tal vez hay planetas que realmente, o lugares donde la vida se desarrolla en un santiamén, entonces no se puede descartar completamente que en estrellas masivas o alrededor de estrellas masivas se desarrolle también la vida.
Bueno, mi pregunta es sobre el método de tránsito, porque, si bien la única razón por la que el brillo de la estrella disminuye no son los tránsitos, ¿cómo hacen entonces para diferenciar que no sea por otro motivo?
How do you know that is the transit of a planet, but not other things? For example, I don't know, black spots.
So, it's a really good question. It can be really hard. Sometimes we see things that look like a transit, so the brightness of the star changes for a while, it becomes less bright, and we hope, or we think, I hope when I see that it's a planet, but in some case it is something else. The stars themselves, they may have spots on the star, they may have things that change their brightness, there may be binary stars that cause eclipses, so in general, it can be really hard. So the way we can do this is by trying to find the same planets that transits with radial velocities, moving with the star, because then we see the same planet in two different ways, and then there is really no other options. Other than that, sometimes we have to just try to avoid all these other options by being very careful, by getting more data, and by trying, with all the data we have, to be as sure as we can that something is a planet. And sometimes as sure as we can means maybe 99.9%, but not 100. And well, that's how it's going to be. But luckily, we have 2,500 planets, So maybe 1 or 2 of them are not really planets, but something else, but then we'll still have 3,498 left, so I think we're good.
Ok, la respuesta a la pregunta es, por ejemplo, una de las maneras para saber qué es un planeta y no es otra cosa, es observándolo con otro método, por ejemplo el método de la velocidad radial. Si tú ves el tránsito y después ves que la estrella se mueva, dices, pues ¿qué dicen por ahí? Si es blanco, el gallina lo pone y frito se come, ¿cierto? Entonces es un planeta. Lo otro es, no, siendo muy cuidadosos en el análisis y determinando hasta una probabilidad muy alta que es un planeta. Aún así, si la probabilidad no es del 100%, 99.9%, y uno tiene 10.000 planetas, ¿cierto? Con una probabilidad del 99.9% pueden haber algunos que no son planetas realmente, pero todavía queda un montón que sí lo son. ¿Alguna otra pregunta queda por aquí? Vamos a hacer las 2 últimas preguntas porque nuestro invitado lleva trabajando. You are working from since 6 o'clock in the morning?
I've been teaching since Tuesday morning.
Oh my, since Tuesday morning, you know, desde el martes está trabajando. Lo trajimos porque estamos esclavizando a un europeo.
Ese no lo entendió. No entendió. Esclavizando a un europeo.
Bueno, era para preguntar si el tiempo entre el tránsito importa en algo, o sea, si la luz baja por 1 hora o por media hora o por 1 minuto, si eso es algo determinante a la hora de saber si es un planeta o es otra cosa.
How long a transit takes?
Yes, and how this is important, yes. The duration.
So normally a planet, if it crosses in front of a star, that will take a few hours. It's a little bit like when you have a solar eclipse, you know, things can take a certain amount of time, depending on where the objects are. So a transit of a planet will typically take maybe 2 hours, sometimes 5 hours, or 7 hours, something like that. So if we see something that changes in brightness that doesn't last 5 hours, but maybe 2 whole weeks, then it's certainly not a planet. So we can use this to distinguish between what's real and what's not, because we know more or less how long a transit should take. But we can do a little bit better. If we know the star, and we know the mass of the star, and we know the radius of the star, we can actually predict how long a transit should take. So we will then know exactly how long this transit should be, and if it's that kind of length, it's a good evidence that this is really a planet. So actually, like how long a transit takes gives us a lot of information about the planet and about if it's really where we think it is.
Ok, la duración, como ven al final, nosotros digamos la duración del tránsito, pues da mucha información, pero entre otras cosas nos dice si es un planeta realmente. Los tránsitos duran más o menos un par de horas, 2 horas, 3 horas, 10 horas, sabiendo la masa de la estrella, uno puede verificar si es 10 horas. Porque si el tránsito, por ejemplo, dura 5 días y uno conoce la masa de la estrella, no puede decir, no hay ningún planeta que dure 5 días pasando. Entonces también nos puede dar una idea de que eso sí es un planeta, la duración. The last question here. La última pregunta en el micrófono. Ya ahorita van a tener posibilidad de tomarse fotos. Let's take some pictures with Vincent. And with this is an exciting conference. This is an exciting talk or something. Okay, gracias.
¿Qué otro tipo de fenómenos detectables pueden significar inteligencia, aparte de lo que tradicionalmente se está buscando como vida? ¿Puede haber otro tipo de asuntos detectables que pueden inducir a una manifestación de inteligencia?
So, I'll try to answer. I hope I got the right question, otherwise I'm just going to answer something else. So, what else can cause, how else can we see life on other planets? Well, so the way I talked about it is mostly...
As intelligent.
As intelligent, yeah. So the way I talked about it was mostly finding oxygen or the atmospheres, these things. Another very common way that people usually think about is SETI. It's actually finding radio signals coming from other planets. And the idea is that on Earth, since we've become intelligent, we've started using, radios, TVs, telephones, and a lot of this radiation that we use to communicate with each other goes through satellites and then to us, but also goes to the rest of space. So when we get, antennas in space, when we get satellites in space, that will give us radio signals they don't just come to us, they also go to everywhere else in space. And so if that's true, it means that other people can look at us and see our TV and radio channels, which maybe is not good news if they can, follow our TV, but that may also be the way we can find other life. We can look at their radio wavelengths at the signals they send, and it's not just TVs and radios, it's also like military radars and things like that, which also leak into space and which maybe can be detected from far away.
Se pueden detectar otras cosas como radares, como otros tipos de comunicación. Como estos son unos tiempos excitantes, todos para arriba a tomar una foto aquí. A ver, por favor. The center is, no, but let Vincent in the center. Okay. You gotta take it down, okay. No, come on. Yes. Picture. Okay. Vincent, we can see Vincent or no? Vincent. Okay. Hey, picture. Hey. Digan Vincent. Okay. ¡Hey, aplausos! Gracias, profe.
Quedó todo lo no, quedó de este lado. Antes no tenía sino 500.
Ya se los consumió todos.
Poncho. Yo iba a Pandora aquí. ¿Qué va esto? Como que Tatuí, ¿no? Ah, se llama el grupazo, mamá. Tatuí. Ok. Muchachos, los de Veracruz. Vámonos. Chao, papá. Ale, ¿qué está, hermana? ¿Dónde está? Ale, yo le digo, Sebas, ¿cuándo la vamos a mandar el escopo? El lunes.
Espera, sí. Como el película.
Hay que foto de rey, le pasan la cámara.
Yo quería que dijeran unas cosas en alemán. Porque a los holandeses les gusta que hablen alemán. Como el británico y el Estados Unidos más o menos.
Ya la puso.